Hello, all, and welcome to the Forever Charmed podcast. Today we're going to be talking about whitelighters. Whitelighters are good beings of light who are sent to guide future witches or current witches, as well as future whitelighters. Now, in the rebooted version of Charmed, we have Harry, and Harry is obviously a guide to the Charmed Ones, as he has announced himself, which is equivalent to the legacy version of Charmed's Leo Wyatt, although Leo was much less abrupt in his introduction to the Charmed sisters. So without further ado, what are Whitelighters' powers? Obviously, in the new version of Charmed, we see Harry using telekinesis. This is definitely something that Whitelighters have used in the legacy version of Charmed, and it is good to see that it is continuing over. This also may help Harry work with Macy, as she has the telekinetic abilities, so it'll be interesting and unique to see if they form a friendship over beginning to understand and use their powers. Now, in the legacy version of Charmed, there's also other powers that Whitelighters possess. Some of the early powers were the telekinetic, orbing, healing, just orbing, spellcasting, scrying, potion making, glamoring, and reconstitution. Now, orbing allows them to get place to place, healing allows them to heal their charges, and this is kind of the subcategory, which there's still some debate whether Whitelighters are trained in spellcasting, scrying, and potion making, or if it is because they work around witches that they learn to spellcast, scry, and potion make. Either way, Leo Wyatt, as well as Chris Halliwell and Wyatt Halliwell later on, both exhibited signs of independently being able to spellcast, scry, and make potions on their own. The only one of those three, though, aforementioned, is that Leo was only a Whitelighter, and being only a Whitelighter, he was the only one that would have been questionable to spellcast. But since he does have magic, it does make sense. So there you go. Now, glamoring is something that was shown by Whitelighters and half-Whitelighters to be used. It means they could change into look like someone else. Paige did this for a personal gain cause, where she was upset that her ex-boyfriend was going to get married, so she changed into his current wife, and then they were going to get married at the altar. Well, that didn't happen, but ergo, it did set a precedence that half-Whitelighters had the ability to glamour. Reconstitution, from what I can tell, probably has to do with the cellular structure of a Whitelighter. Piper blew up Leo at least once or twice, and it was a good thing he was a Whitelighter, otherwise he'd have been probably seriously hurt. But he was able to reconstitute himself and continue talking to his then-wife about her shenanigans with blowing him up. So far, as we have already talked about, Harry has only shown in a very brief 35-second clip that he has the ability to handle telekinesis, which in his case will probably be very good, and it'll be interesting to see what they develop further on for Harry. So, as we discussed as well, there is additional powers as sensing. Whitelighters need to be able to sense their charges. Means to see how their well-being is, needs to see if they need to check in on them. Assuming that they are following the mold, which they clearly are, of the legacy version of Charmed, the mold definitely says that Harry should be able to sense and know where his charges are. So that is definitely something that will be more increasingly used, at least fundamentally we hope. And I will be curious to see how often he is going to have to track down these girls. Because for a while, admittedly, Leo Wyatt had to track down the girls a lot. There are different levels of Whitelighters. Now, there is the Whitelighter that works, which is clearly Harry, and the very early version of Leo, and sort of an early version of Chris. But Leo became an elder. And as an elder, they have different rules, different powers. When Leo became an elder, he got a whole new set of powers, which if you watch the original Charmed, you know he became very good with electrokinesis, and he almost was like a super-powered witch by having these powers. It did happen with a storyline that brought in Chris, and it definitely is an interesting thing. However, all that said about Whitelighters and elders, there is the debate that continues to rage on even today in the legacy community. We talk about it, and that is who was Wyatt Halliwell, and he was born the King of Magic. Now, Wyatt was the oldest son of Piper and Leo, and he pulled Excalibur out of a stone, literally, in the original TV series, which led us to believe he was incredibly powerful. This was more reaffirmed by his younger brother, Chris Halliwell, returning from the future to the past to try and save his brother from imploding into evil and having dark orbs. Now, that's one thing that we probably should kind of go through, is that if a dark lighter is around, that is a white lighter's weakness. And that goes for half white lighters or full white lighters. If a dark lighter hits them with an arrow, it's bad news. So it'll be interesting to see if there are some dark lighters in this series and what they do with the dark lighters. But back to Wyatt. Wyatt is arguably the most powerful witch/white lighter on the planet or in history. And we, as the Legacy of Charmed version, never really did discover his full potential. We know that he became a good witch, and that was kind of it. But he had a great deal of possibilities of having just witch powers and so much more. And it'll be interesting to see if they go down the route of having a Wyatt in here. Although I don't know how far along in the series it would have to go to introduce a character like Wyatt, or if he already exists, or if you really want to make the Charmed Legacy version people very happy, you incorporate that Wyatt does exist in the entire Charmed universe, and he can come from San Francisco, and you might actually make the fans of the Legacy version a little bit happy because he could drag Chris along, and then we have one big happy family reunion. Alright, moving on. So, in talking about Harry, I'm going to go on a tangent again, I'm sorry. Harry is a name that is being so overused on the CW right now. Even if you do not watch the Arrowverse, or if you know nothing about the Arrowverse, you're going to see commercials for the Arrowverse. And Harry is a very prominent character on The Flash. And Harry's character has been rebooted on The Flash 4 times, and will be rebooted a 5th time on The Flash, coming in their new season. And I feel like giving Harry, the White Lighter, the name Harry, has put him at a slight disadvantage, because every time I hear Harry now, I always wonder what's going on with The Flash. What did they do with Harry? Because Harry is a great actor. I don't want to see Harry go anywhere on The Flash. It's kind of not a big deal if you only are watching just the very segmented version of the rebooted Charm. But eventually you're going to see Harry, and you're going to go, couldn't we have picked another name like George or something? Anyway, another question about Harry: is Harry alive or dead? I have seen in the new version of the Charmed rebooted wiki, and in a couple areas, where they have declared that Harry is alive. And that is not necessarily true. Anybody that had watched the Legacy version of Charmed knows for a fact that Leo Wyatt was in fact dead. Leo died being a war hero. He was a medic, and he was skilled in hand-to-hand combat, and he died saving wounded soldiers. And that is actually how he became a White Lighter. So there is a very big backstory to Harry, and if Harry is alive or is Harry dead. Harry looks alive, but you can be dead as a human and be reborn, I guess, as a White Lighter, but a White Lighter doesn't have paperwork to say, I'm real. This actually did happen in the Legacy version of Charmed when he was attempting to get married and trying to file a marriage certificate, because the only marriage certificate, or birth certificate for that matter, that existed was in his previous lifetime. And in his previous lifetime, it was from like 1923, making it very difficult for Piper to get a marriage license. Another thing with Harry that I find curious is there's some people talking about, is Harry Marisol's White Lighter? Now, I have 2 opinions of Harry being Marisol's White Lighter. The first opinion is it possible that Mel and Maggie are in fact Harry's daughters? I would find that much more interesting if he was their father, because that makes them half White Lighters and having to deal with another layer. Now, instead of being Macy being a half whitelighter. We don't know much about Macy, and we'll talk about Macy much later. But I'm definitely curious to see what Harry and Marisol's relationship was. Now, in Charmed, we know from the Legacy version that Patty and Sam were together, and they had a younger daughter named Paige. And she was given up to a church, and that's how they kept her birth a secret from the elders. Well, in theory, witches and whitelighters aren't supposed to be together, so if we're back to square one with the rebooted charm, then it makes sense, in theory, if Mel and Maggie are in fact half whitelighters. But we'll see where this goes. I would prefer to see, let's just go with this taboo topic of whitelighters and witches and take it head on with Mel and Maggie being half whitelighters and Macy being the, for lack of a better term, non-whitelighter and muggle. And if you watch Harry Potter, you know a muggle is someone without powers, which doesn't actually fit completely for Macy. So with that, my next idea here is that I am going to break down the character of Macy. Now, I've kind of looked at this two ways, and I'm debating on which way is the most effective way to do it, and that definitely is going to be a journey. Macy cannot actually be linearly compared to Prue and to Paige, because we don't know what Macy's other half is. Macy may just be half witch, half human, and that would be just fine. But what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to compare what we've seen from her, which is just straight telekinesis, no telekinetic orbing, which would have been a trademark of Paige, and compare her to Prue, and also compare her attitude to Prue. She doesn't seem to have the same attitude as Prue did. That definitely seems to go to Mel, from what I can tell. And I'm not sure that any of these characters have the Piperish demeanor about them. Perhaps maybe Macy does. But in tomorrow's episode, my goal is to break down Macy, the character, what we've seen from her character content, what possibilities can she be like Prue, and what possibilities can be distinctly different. It may include some speculation and some theories, and I'm greatly looking forward to deep diving into it. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you guys and talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.